I wasn't going to make this video, but I noticed several of you had questions or doubts about robotic mowers when it comes to longer grass, specifically robotic lawnmowers that have a razor blade style cutting deck or disc. And honestly, I don't blame you. The concept can appear like a gimmick. So I decided not to cut my backyard for a little over a month to allow the grass and weeds to grow much more than what's ideal for robotic mowers of this class to see what happens. Typically, the companies that make these mowers suggest not to let your grass get this high. For example, for the initial cut, it's recommended to use a regular lawnmower to bring the grass down to a normal height and then let the robotic mower take over from there to maintain the grass. Well, today we're making the rules, and currently I've only had experience with 3 robotic mowers, and I know robotic mowers come in all shapes and sizes, but I think overall, mowers of this class will give similar results. So for this test, I'm going to use the Mammotion mower I reviewed not too long ago, and no, this video is not sponsored in any way, just a video that will either make you hate robotic mowers even more, or address concerns you may have had before purchasing one. So anyway, enough talking, let's jump right into it. So I decided to keep the mowing parameters set to some of the defaults, except since I knew the longer grass would trip the ultrasonic sensors, I turned those off. I also set the mowing height to 45 millimeters, which by the way is another thing not recommended when dealing with a yard in this condition, but I'm curious to see what happens. Another change I'll be making in this test video is that I will not speed up any of the close-up shots of the mower so that you can gain a realistic idea for what to expect with most of these robotic mowers. So going into this test, I had an assumption that the mower would probably be able to chop down the grass and weeds. However, I figured it was going to probably take several mowing cycles before the yard looked like a regular lawnmower cut it. If you look closely, you can see pieces of grass not cut after the mower passes over, which is what I figured would be the issue, and a second or third pass may be needed before all the grass is clipped. Take a look at this. So as I mentioned, some of the grass is chopped, but a portion is just bent over or barely nicked. This is probably where I have the thickest type of grass, where even sometimes my regular electric mower will get bogged down if it's been a while since I cut the yard, and I have the mower height set really low. So I was curious to see how the robotic mower will handle it. Now, I thought it was also interesting how the mower spent a bit more time in this area, as if it knew the grass needed to be run over a few times due to how thick it was. But it was probably more of a coincidence, since from what I remember, this mower does not auto adjust based on the condition of the grass. But if I'm wrong, feel free to let me know in the comments. I don't know about you, but watching these mowers cut is like watching paint dry sometimes, but it seems to definitely be making some progress. But again, I can still tell I'll have to run this mowing cycle at least 2 more times before the yard looks like I cut it. Let's get a closer look again of the grass, as standing up, the grass looks not half bad, but bending down, you can see the strips of grass missed. But overall, I'd say it's cutting about 70 to 80% of the grass it passes over, which isn't terrible in my opinion, since I can be in the house and all I have to do is press a button and the mower will happily remow the yard again and again and again until I'm satisfied. Here's another type of weed or grass that is much taller than what we've been cutting, and the mower seems to handle chopping this species of grass down without any issues. Probably only a second pass would be needed for this area if I had to guess. Apparently, not everyone was happy I was finally cutting my backyard. One guy never took his eyes off me and just stared me down and refused to move.
Five minutes later.
Alright, all jokes aside, let's circle back to the cutting test and see how things are going. So it seems to handle this type of grass much better, but just like we've seen, it will still leave a few stragglers here and there. After seeing that the mower should have no issues completing the mowing cycle, I decided to take a break from following the mower and just grab a bird's eye view of the mowing process while the cycle completes. After the first mowing cycle completed, since I knew a second cycle was going to be needed, I went ahead and restarted the process. After the second cycle completes, we'll take a closer look at the yard and see if a third cycle is needed. So after the mower finished the second cycle, from afar, you may think the mower did a decent job getting the yard back under control. However, in a moment, you'll see when I took a closer look, there were still a few stragglers that needed to be dealt with. But I could tell that with each pass, the mower was getting closer and closer to getting the yard back to how I personally like to see it cut. So I politely asked the mower to do a third pass, and it seemed to not mind at all and went right to work. After the third pass was completed, I gave the mower a thumbs up. The yard space the mower was responsible for cutting was finally cut to my liking. Of course, around the edges of the yard, I'll still need to take my weed eater to finish things up, but that usually takes less than 10 minutes to complete. So my conclusion from this test is, if you were to skip cutting your yard for 4 to 5 weeks, for example, I think this class of robotic mowers can probably handle getting the grass cut back to a pleasing to the eye height. But as you saw, it would probably take several cycles to accomplish that. But again, this isn't recommended, and with most of these robotic mowers, you can set up a schedule so your grass is always maintained at a reasonable height. And shorter grass in the long run would put less wear and stress on the mower. So hopefully this test was useful for those interested in this mowing technology. And also for anyone who may be wondering, are you still working on DIY projects? Yes, I still am, just at a slower rate this year, since my priorities have slightly shifted, so stay tuned. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.